So you want to improve your hip mobility and squat capacity? In today's video, we'll do just that. Is the squat your favorite exercise for leg day? Is the deep squat a good position for you to rest? If you answered no to either of these questions, you might have some mobility issues. Let's take care of that today. What you'll need to understand is why squatting is such a difficult task for so many people, and what we can do to fix it. You'll also need to understand the anterior and posterior pelvic tilts and their role in performing a squat. So in this video, we'll improve our squat and hip mobility, not just by looking at the hips and the way that they move, but coming all the way down into the feet, ankle mobility, knee flexibility, and back strength. The most common cause for squatting difficulties is exactly what I'm doing right now. Sitting too much. Before tables and chairs that were created to make our squat as lazy as possible, we were either resting in a full squat or at least sitting in lower positions where we had to drop down a little bit further than what we do today. When I get back on that chair, my knee isn't in a full bend as it was when I was in that deep squat. So my quads, for instance, are relaxed in this half bent position. What is the result? When you go to do a squat, maybe you can only go to here because you can't get that strength throughout the whole bend. Not just the quads, but so many other muscles not being used. The moment I step or come off of that chair, and even in a half squat, I feel my shins, quads, hamstrings, glutes, and back to maintain that position. But what we want to do is we want to be able to get a good squat, not just in that position, but all the way down so that we can rest in this position. Our first exercise, we'll look at hip rotation. Take your right foot and bring it out just a little bit. From there, you're going to put your weight into your left leg, lift your right knee, and open it up. Then, without touching it to the ground, press it inward. You should feel a stretch through the groin once you're pushing all the way out. You should feel some tension in the butt when you're pressing it inward. 5 to 10 of these. No need to push it too hard, but aim for that little bit of a stretch and contraction. And then switch sides. If you're having trouble, if your knees hurt and you can't do this kneeling down, you can stand up, put your foot up behind you on a rock or a chair, and do the same thing. Now let's go over the anterior and posterior pelvic tilts that I mentioned earlier in the video. Our pelvis tilts anteriorly or to the front, and we're looking at the top of our pelvis right here, and posteriorly or backward, where the top of our pelvis goes back. Anterior tilt and posterior tilt. What does this have to do with squatting? Well, when we're getting into our squat, people call it a butt wink, where our back rounds out and we see the tailbone sort of come underneath the body. When we're carrying a lot of weight on our back and trying to lift it up, we don't want to have to see our pelvis do this rounding out. We want to have a nice neutral spine as we go all the way down. So the lesson for this is the longer that you can maintain that neutral spine, the better. Tight hamstrings typically cause this tilt when we're squatting. So we'll need to stretch those hamstrings, and we're going to use that pelvic tilt motion to help stretch the hamstrings. Take a half kneel position. I've got my left in front of my right. I'm going to kick out my left foot and pull my toe up. And then I'm actually going to do an anterior pelvic tilt, and just by doing that, without even leaning forward, I feel a deep stretch all the way through the hamstring. Now I could try to push myself forward. I really don't have to all that much. If I just lead with my belly and pull my tailbone back, I stretch it really deeply in that hamstring. And now I'm going to do the opposite. From this position, I'm just going to pull my tailbone under in a posterior tilt to get a good stretch in the quads and hip flexors of the opposite leg. So if I turn this way, now I've got my right leg here. The more I raise my heel, the deeper stretch I'll get. So I'm going to tuck my toe underneath. Posterior tilt, ooh, I really squeeze that glute and push this hip forward underneath like so. Now I get this deep stretch all through the front of the thigh. If this isn't enough for you, you can always take it here. And I'm still pushing from here, trying to bring that tailbone underneath, stretching like so. Anterior tilt, pull that tailbone back, stretch the hamstring, and posterior tilt, squeeze the glute, tailbone comes underneath, tuck the toe under, or lift the foot. Squatting is not only in the hips and thighs. We need to use our ankles, our shins, and our calves a little bit too. So here we'll do a couple exercises to get down into the ankle. To begin, find something with an edge. It can be at ground level or close to ground level, but we want to be able to get our heels down below that corner. Lift up your toes. Try to bend your ankle as much as you can with your feet coming up towards you in dorsiflexion and come out of it. So that's 1, do 10 of these. A more advanced version, I'm going to take my foot raised up a little bit. All my weight comes here. If you have knee problems, it might be difficult to do this. Here, I'm going to try to isolate in here rather than help out in the back. Pull the toe up, leaning forward, and it mimics that squatting knee position a little bit more than standing on the edge. So you want to be able to get in and out of a nice ankle bend and knee bend. And that exercise is going to help you do that. Our other ankle exercise will be done with something heavy that you can place on top of your feet, or that you can get your feet underneath, like a couch, or here I have this large log. It's high enough up off the ground for me to tuck my feet in without it squashing my feet, but I'm just going to lean back and see how far back I can go without toppling it over or without falling. Then I'm going to come back into this position. Standing, leaning back, curling that log with me, and coming back into it. So those two exercises, the calf raise as well as the dorsiflexion, are going to help with that shin and ankle mobility. Another common problem when performing a squat is something called valgus collapse, when the knees come inward. Our gluteus medius are in charge of bringing our knees out, this lateral movement, and when we drop into a squat, it helps stabilize our knees so that we're not wobbling all over the place. And one thing that you can do to fix this is an exercise called clamshells. Here on our elbow, with our knees in about a 90-degree bend, I'm going to close, and I'll offer a little bit of resistance by my hand, and I can feel that working back behind the butt all the way out. And I'm going to press it down with my hand and just keep that resistance on my knee. 5% should be good. And then switch sides. Take a little rest when you switch sides, because when you're actually lying down in this position, you're using your left leg to drive down into the ground so you can maintain your whole body position. The other exercise that will help with that gluteus medius is just a lateral raise. So from here, make sure you press your butt forward a little bit, get a nice straight line. We don't want to come upward to here. just a good straight raise up to the side without turning our foot, because then we start using the hip flexor when we turn the foot. Keep that toe pointed down, if anything, and press and hold. Same thing here, 5 to 10 good reps, and then switch sides. And once again, you're actually driving that bottom foot down into the ground a little bit, using a little bit of the same muscles, so take a little bit of a rest. And last exercise here, we're just gonna work a little bit with the back and the hips with a seated good morning. Here, knees are bent, feet are flat on the ground. I'm gonna activate my back, keep it nice and neutral. Hands up behind my head. I'm gonna come down, and maybe I feel some stretching down in my hamstrings and in my groin, and I'm just gonna come back up. What we don't want is to round out down here and just to simply come back up. Keep that stable position throughout the back. And maybe you only go down to here for now. That's okay. Just activate your core, brace it, and just go back and forth. If you want, you can straighten your legs a little bit more, and that'll get a deeper stretch down in the hamstrings and probably make your movement not go as far. But that's okay. We all start somewhere. If you have some weight that you want and you're ready, take it as a seated good morning with weight on your shoulders. Make sure to keep it engaged here and neutral in the spine. So that's it. Just by doing these exercises, I could feel how much easier it is for me to get all the way down into this resting squat. Now, once you're comfortable, start adding on some weight. On the front, or on the back. Enjoy.